Marah and Bryce, thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with me about your film Space Cowboy. I want to start by recognizing how much Pacific Northwest is in this meeting right now. I am based in Bellingham, and I am aware that Bryce, you're from Kennewick, and Marah, you're from Portland.
Correct.
So,
Yes, I was actually just in Blaine, Washington for a wedding, so I
oh, and you
drove.
didn't stop by and say hi, Bryce. Come on.
I know, I'm slacking. I'm slacking.
No, it's great. I love coming across Pacific Northwest filmmaking talent, so I'm really happy to be talking with you guys.
You too.
So let's talk about what we have going on with this film. And actually, I really want to start with your own personal experience with skydiving. Do you guys skydive? Are you skydivers? What's your personal relationship with the activity?
Should I start, Bryce?
Yeah, you have a much better story than
Uh,
me.
it's funny. Neither Bryce or I are skydivers. I have skydived. My first film, Sunshine Superman, was a film about base jumping, and my uncle was a skydiver base jumper. So they told me I had to base or skydive a few times. But, like with a lot of documentaries, we do not do the thing that our documentary is about necessarily, but we love it visually. And we are often asked this question, but I think from being from the outside, we can even appreciate it a little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah, great answer.
Uh,
Bryce, how about you?
yeah, for me, I unfortunately have not gone skydiving, and that's something I get a hard time from Joe. But the good part about that is, had it not been for that fact, I don't know if this film would have been made because I was directing a commercial for a clothing brand, and there was a skydiving component that I wanted to add to it, and I had zero idea how to film it. I was like, well, I'm not able to go up there, so a couple Google searches later, and I was on a phone call with Joe. So I have my non-relationship with skydiving became the reason for my relationship with Joe. So
Well, that's really cool. Interesting how, sometimes a need arises and really great things come from that.
for sure.
Um, Mara, let's talk a little bit about the film. Can you give a brief synopsis on what Space Cowboy is about?
Yeah, Space Cowboy is a film that is about Joe Jennings, who's an aerial cinematographer and stunt skydiver. On the surface, it's really about, his life creating these amazing images and doing amazing stunt work in Hollywood or otherwise, his rise to success at the X Games. And then I think on a deeper level, it's really about depression and grief. And it's a love story about a friendship that is Joe and Rob Harris. And, it's got a lot of elements, but I would say, it's a sports film with a deeper film inside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I guess I start with the obvious question is how you came across this story and what drew you to making this film. Because like you mentioned, your film Sunshine sorry, a Sunshine Superman was about base jumping. And so it's interesting the connection between these extreme activities that you have in your as a focus on your documentaries.
Yes, I mean, Bryce approached me, and Bryce was making this film about Joe Jennings. And as he said, he was starting to really make this commercial, and then he discovered Joe Jennings. And, I not only made Sunshine Superman, but I also made a film about the wrestler China. So I love films about people that are obsessed with an activity, that do something that really makes them feel alive. And I love the visuals of skydiving and base jumping and wrestling and things where, there's this very lively sensibility. And I think when Bryce showed me the footage from this film or from Joe's life, later to become this film, I was like, this is amazing. This stuff is really beautiful. And, Joe's creating really an art form with what he's doing. And I think this was totally in alignment with my film Sunshine Superman. Interestingly, the camera that was used in Sunshine Superman by Carl Banish is the same camera that Joe Jennings used in Space Cowboy. So for me, it was kind of one of those meant to be situations where I knew that, you know, it was really right to be involved in this project.
Yeah, that sounds great. Bryce, that brings me over to you. This is your directorial debut, right?
Yep, this is the first one for me.
I want to know a little bit more about that journey for you. It sounds like you've been doing commercial work and now you have a film under your belt. Tell me about your path getting there.
Yeah, I've kind of like most people, a pretty strange path into filmmaking. I was actually playing basketball professionally as a career before. I was living in Germany, playing in some overseas leagues, and I was just doing, writing and some commercial stuff as a total passion thing when I'd come back to America in the summers. And like I said before, the one of those, self-funded passion projects led me to meeting Joe. And I was just, awestruck by him. I was fascinated by his career, his story, and then as I got to know him as a person, just even more interested in his emotional journey, and some of the highs and lows he's had there. So I set out to make a film, and kind of like I said before, of uh, not being a skydiver leading me to meeting Joe. Well, not being a filmmaker led me to meeting Marah, because I'm a big believer in, if you want to be good at something, you need to study the people that are kind of at the top of that craft and figure out what they're doing right. So I saw Marah had made Sunshine Superman, and it was an incredibly compelling and impactful film for me, and I got a hold of her and sought some mentorship, and that turned into a friendship, and somehow I tricked her into going on this crazy journey with me.
Bryce is very curious, and I think, you know, that's one of the biggest things about being a good filmmaker, and especially a good documentarian, is being a curious, open person. And I think, you know, Bryce is really brings that to the table as a filmmaker.
That's a very good point, especially with documentaries. Curiosity really fuels, how we perceive documentaries and how we go about, taking in documentaries. But I can only imagine documentaries are super hard to make. You don't have the narrative structure ahead of time, and you're just, filming it out the way you pre-planned it. A lot of times, documentaries just kind of unfold, and you kind of find the story as you're documenting. I guess I want to know a little bit more about how much of this story you had kind of figured out ahead of time and how much of it you discovered as you were filming the film.
You want me to take that? I would say Bryce and I discuss this film a lot. And, you know, one of the nice things about making documentaries where some of the things have already happened is, you know what's happened. So, I mean, there was definitely, I mean, with this film, there are two storylines. So there's the storyline of Joe's life that's really told through archival footage. And then there's this B storyline, which is this amazing stunt that Joe's doing where he's throwing, you know, a car out of an airplane, and, you know, all of the trials and tribulations of that activity. So obviously we did not know what was going to happen on this amazing stunt that he was doing, but we did know his life story. So although there was a huge editing process of all the things we thought might go into the film, we really honed in on what we wanted to communicate through this project ahead of time. And I think we had, you know, the great luxury of, really being able to map out this, what we wanted to say. But that said, you know, there's like over 150, 200 hours of footage. So there's a lot within that that needs to be decided.
Yeah. Bryce, do you want to add to that? This thing is, since this is a story you kind of stumbled upon?
Yeah, I think I guess the trick of it is, like Mara said, we had a lot of discussions based on research and pre-interviews, and the archive footage that we were starting to go through, and which you're finding a lot of the story within that archive. But I think the interviews that we did, you're kind of trying to find this balance of poking around at the areas you know you need to poke around, but also letting the people you're interviewing, especially Joe, take you to places that you didn't even know, so that you can be informed on new parts of the story as it evolves. So I think I forgot who, it might even have been Marah that said this to me, but somebody was basically saying that if you got to the end of your documentary and it was this and it's the exact same story that you started with, you didn't do it right. So it's always evolving, and that's something I think that Marah and I's sensibilities both line up in is not putting our own agendas or preconceived notions on things, but kind of just letting the truth come out of the story, and then finding a way to sculpt that into something that, you know, becomes this bigger piece of art.
Yeah, that actually leads right into my next question. I only have a couple more, but that leads me into my next question. With documentaries, there's such educational experiences for us as an audience. You know, I know nothing about skydiving. I know nothing about stunt skydiving, and I know nothing about cinematographic stunt skydiving, right? It's a really cool subject to have a documentary on now. But I wonder if that educational experience for the audience is similar to the filmmaker. I guess my question is, in the process of making this film, what did this story teach you guys as you were working on it?
Why don't you start?
Yeah, I think for sure some of the, you know, of course I learned some of these techniques, skydiving history, you know, a lot about the sport, but I will say like the thing that sticks out the most that I learned and that I think escapes kind of the layman eye when you watch what Joe does is that if you take any object of any size and throw it out of an airplane in flight, that object is going to hit the air and just go crazy. It's going to not only be dangerous, but it's going to be stuntmen won't be able to interact with it in flight. Cinematographers like Joe won't be able to film it because it's going 200 miles an hour and it's out of control. And, you know, what Joe and his crew of people such as Steve Curtis and Roland Barksdale have really kind of pioneered, and you know, they won't say they mastered it, but to us it seems like they mastered it, is the art of making objects fly, which is in our film you'll see it as extremely complex process of counterweighting and jimmy rigging and putting slopes on things, and manipulating air in flight. And it's not only you know, scientific, it's also just like extremely exploratory of it just hasn't been done a lot. So that part of it is something that I wouldn't have even expected coming into this project, and I learned a ton about, and I think anybody that watches the film will be blown away to learn that too.
Yeah, I have to wrap up. And I appreciate that answer. But before I go, I just, you know, the film is premiering here at the Toronto International Film Festival. Marah, you've been at TIFF before with Sunshine Superman. I guess I just in a few statements or a few words, what does it mean to you to have this film, Space Cowboy, premiering here at TIFF?
For me, it's the best possible place for this film to premiere. It's 10 years after Sunshine Superman, and you know, it's an experience I'm really excited to share with Bryce and to you know, it's the best audiences, it's the best, you know, Tom Powers has been amazing, and it's a very amazing privilege to get to play a film here again.
Yeah, Bryce, you have a quick statement about that?
I just could probably echo the same thing. It's premiering this film at TIFF is like an honor, and it's the best possible outcome for looking back where I started to now, and the fact that it's a really special festival to Marah, who's become my mentor, and like you said, we get to share this experience together. It just, you know, it makes it even better.
Wonderful. Marah, Bryce, this really was a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak with you about Space Cowboy. I hope you guys have a wonderful TIFF, and I can't wait to hear about how audience receive the film when it premieres.